The jury is hearing evidence about the roadside suicide attempt that we'll talk about more in a minute. But the question is, I keep hearing on the TV commentators that this is the nail in the coffin. Do you agree, Patrick?
I think it's just more piling on. I don't really see the point, to be honest. I know the defense doesn't want it in, and they don't want it in. It's very close to propensity evidence and bad character evidence. I don't see how you could make a connection of this with the motive. And I guess that's not why he's letting it in. I guess he's letting it in simply because Jim Griffin opened the door when he brought up Cousin Eddie getting paid for drugs. I think what it definitely opens the door for is an appeal.
Yeah. Let's talk to people in case you're unaware. In 30 seconds, here's what the roadside incident is. 2.5 months after the murders, in September, Alex Murdaugh calls 911 and says that somebody just tried to shoot him in the head as he was changing a tire. The 911 call is recorded. He gives this whole story about it was an attempted murder. And then we have a police sketch, an investigation that's done by the police. He is shot, by the way, in the head. He gives a description of this younger person. And then he changes his story completely, that actually he made all of this up and he had his distant cousin and former client, Eddie Smith, try to shoot him to commit suicide. And he did this so that he couldn't shoot himself because he had a suicide clause in his insurance, his life insurance. He wanted this $12 million life insurance policy to go to his one surviving son, and they botched it. Either he chickened out and moved, or Eddie was a really bad shot. But either way, he didn't die. He didn't commit suicide, and apparently the suicide clause in his life insurance policy was no longer active anyway, so it wouldn't have made a difference. So if he could have gone ahead and killed himself anyway. This was one of the things that just adds on to the bizarreness of this case and the story. But how much relevance does it have to June 7th and whether or not he killed Maggie and Paul?
I would say none. I have a struggle with this theory that the state has even before this. It makes no sense to me that you're trying to argue this motive to distract when what it did was put a microscope over everything going on in your life. It's really weird to think that thought process was, I'm going to murder my wife and son to distract from my financial crimes, and that's going to be a distraction. And then immediately said, here's my phone. You need to come into my house and search my house? Sure. Here's all my guns. Here's where I keep all my ammunition. Oh, you need my clothes? Here's my clothes. I mean, he basically gave them everything over and over again. It just seems like a really strange theory. You throw in this attempted suicide, I don't see how that furthers the motive other than just further evidence that he lies. And I think that that's very clear. He's a liar.
Yeah, I think that they established over about 2 weeks of testimony, with several days of that being his financial fraud, that this man is a compulsive liar who is a private person who will stare a person in the face, lie to them, take their money, show up to work every day, knowing he's taking their money day after day after day, looking clients in the eye while he's stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from him, look his partners in the eye while he's stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from them for years. And, obviously what he was telling the police, his alleged alibi, had some major problems with it. And it appears he was lying about that too. So they've been able to prove that Alex is a liar. No doubt. And talk about piling on. That is established with beyond a reasonable doubt, right? You can't trust anything that comes out of Alex's mouth. However, do we have any evidence that he did this to convict him beyond a reasonable doubt for shooting Maggie and Paul?
I think some of the testimony yesterday, especially the cross of the lead investigator, highlighted the weakness of their case. One of the strongest points of that cross was when Jim Griffin started questioning him about his interaction with, I believe it was Shelley. Jim Griffin was crossing the investigator and saying, she said that she saw him carrying a blue tarp. Did you show her a blue tarp? No. Did you show her the raincoat? Yes. And what did you ask her? And he said, I asked her if this is the same color as the tarp that you talked about. But they never revisited the tarp. They found a tarp when she saw a tarp, and then they found this raincoat. And none of his family members and friends ever saw the raincoat before. But they've put so much stock into the fact that that raincoat had gunshot residue in it. So they ignore Shelley's testimony that he came in with a tarp, which they found a tarp that matched the description that Shelley gave. But they also found this raincoat, and that's what they focused on.
What will happen now is the defense will have an opportunity to call any witnesses that they want to call who haven't been heard from since, or recall some witnesses. And they may even have Alex Murdaugh take the stand and testify, which I seriously doubt is going to happen now, because I can't imagine anything he could say because his credibility is shot so badly. Anything that comes out of his mouth, you can't believe it, right?
Oh, and they're going to have a field day with him.
Yeah. It's just not going to be. I would seriously doubt that's going to happen at this point, because if you can't believe anything out of somebody's mouth, what's the point of having them talk? It's just going to make matters worse. I think we got a preview of what their closing arguments are going to look like. We kind of know what the state's going to be arguing, and we know what the defense is going to be arguing, and we got a preview when we saw that cross-examination, which is focusing on some of the things that you just talked about, but also many of the numerous things that were not done at this crime scene. And I think that if you're not following this day to day, it's easy to forget that the stuff they did eventually found, which consisted of a raincoat that nobody's seen before, that nobody saw him ever wear, that had gun residue on it, but no blood. A seatbelt with gun residue, but no blood. And a tarp that was never tested, and a shirt that turned out it didn't have blood on it. That's the state's evidence, right? It's really, really weak. I know it's frustrating if you want to get a conviction or you want to see this. You believe that Alex Murdaugh killed these people, but the problem is they don't have anything. I mean, you don't have any of the things you normally need for a conviction. You don't have any forensic evidence tying him to the murder victims. You don't have any blood on him, which would be forensic evidence that he was there when it happened and would have been covered in blood, which this was a gruesome crime scene. You don't have a confession. You don't have a witness. You don't have any camera footage that's helpful other than this camera footage that shows he was, in fact, near the family members when the state believes that they were murdered. If you go by what the state thinks they were murdered at 8:49, he was with the family at 8:44, maybe even a few minutes earlier. But also, that's speculating that the murders happened when the phone's locked for the last time. That's a big leap that I think the defense is going to be able to really harp on, because let's say it was at 9:15, 8:44 was 30 minutes prior to that, right? If they were killed at 9:15, that was plenty of time for him to go to his parents, where he definitely had gone. We have a witness there saying that. And then when he arrived, he was not covered in blood and he was not agitated.
Yeah.
We have phone calls and he was not agitated. By the way, I mean, just because he doesn't have an alibi, all that means is he had the opportunity to do this.
Yeah.
Well, they've been able to show he probably had the opportunity to do this. His alibi is not lining up, but you got to show more than they just had the opportunity. You got to prove they did it.
Yeah, and even though his alibi is kind of thrown out the window, you still have the just unbelievable series of events that would have to happen in order for him to have done this. You can't convince me that because he lies and steals money that he's not going to be in some kind of elevated stress immediately after this, and he's just casually calling people and talking to them on the phone about cases that he's handling. Like within 20 minutes at the most, you're having a conversation and talking about your work and not seem to somebody you talk to every day and not seem like you're acting unnormal. And then, Shelley had nothing to gain. She wasn't friends with Alex Murdaugh. And she said, yeah, he was fidgety. And then on cross, they said, well, was that normal for him to be fidgety? Yeah, he's a fidgety person. And so it's just like, okay, so what did the state prove? They proved that he was acting normal. And I know that there are absolute sociopaths, but every officer that says that when you...
Let me stop you there. He is a sociopath. I mean, he went... Look at that. The financial crimes... They did a really good job of showing what a sociopath he is.
Yes.
That he was stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from clients, some of whom were handicapped and needed the money. He just completely has no empathy for people and was looking his partners in the eye for years stealing money from them on a
Yeah.
apparently monthly basis.
But you have to be able to show, in my opinion, if I'm sitting on the jury, you're going to need to show that that extends to his family, which by all reports, he was close to every member of his family, right? Even that guy CB, who he kind of dragged into this, he even testified, I never saw that man raise his voice at his children or his wife. And he was around them for years on an almost daily basis.
But here's the other thing about the roadside incident. And I'm just trying to picture what the jury's thinking. If I'm in that jury, I'm thinking he could have snapped that day because he was confronted about his financial crimes. He was under a lot of stress. He was hiding it from his family or whatever. And he could have just snapped and decided to take his own life and was going to take out his family as well, which happens. Why, we don't know, but it happens all the time when the world of suicides is that they'll take out family members too. That's a murder-suicide, and then it comes time for kill himself and he chickens out. That seems very similar to what happened in the roadside incident. He's confronted again about these financial crimes. The walls are caving in. Everything in his life has just completely gone to crap, right? And so now he's decided again to commit suicide, and he can't do it. And so he hires someone to kill him, and he still can't do it. That's a pattern that even if they're not able to argue, right? Because they're arguing that the motive was to cover up the financial crimes. He killed them to distract from the financial crimes, and the suicide attempt was to distract from the financial crimes. I'm wondering if they're going to argue that, but say, if you don't believe that, another alternative is he just wanted to commit suicide on June 7th and chickened out, and he wanted to commit suicide in September during the roadside incident and chickened out. And I don't know if they're going to be allowed to argue that, because if that was the argument, that evidence wouldn't be coming in, right?
Yeah.
They got it in under another argument that it was motive to cover up, right? But I'm wondering if the jury's going to connect those dots regardless of what they say in closing argument. Is that because it's something I've definitely been thinking about watching this, and it seems to make more sense, but so many things about this don't make sense. So we're 3.5 weeks in, and it's still a lot of it does not make any sense.
It's the craziest set of facts I've ever seen. Every day it blows my mind that this is not a fiction story.
Yeah, it wouldn't be believable. It would be so unbelievable. It'd be like, oh, and now he tries to commit suicide in the road, but he tells them it was a murder, and he had his cousin Eddie from across the street, come and try to kill him.
Who was his drug dealer?
Who was his drug dealer? I mean, it's wild, man. It's like just the one thing that this trial has shown is that this story is even crazier than people thought it was, which was hard to top. One thing I fear is I don't know that he's going to be convicted. He might be. But I just don't think we're ever going to really know what happened. And part of that is they didn't do much of an investigation because they obviously did not think that he was the person that did this that night and for 2 more months. And even though he's telling them he didn't do it, they didn't really test that at all. They just accepted it as fact. And then by September, they're thinking, oh, okay. And then they see the Snapchat video and wow, they should have taken a much harder look at him. But by then it's too late. It's 2.5 months later. Any evidence would have been, it's not going to be preserved at that point.
The evidence that they're using, the things that they seem to harp on, they say they had one witness say that he wasn't showing interest, right? Maggie's sister said that he made a statement that he was really interested in clearing Paul's name from the boat crash. And this is after the murders, right? And the sister was like, well, I was interested in finding out who killed Paul and Maggie. The investigator said that, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the extent that, he would call regularly and check in on the case and ask for more information. And then they held that against him. He was showing almost too much interest into the murder of his wife and son.
He was just too interested in knowing who killed his son.
I thought kind of the state's presentation with their star witness was a little kind of all over the place. It just seemed scattered, very hard to follow. And the things they emphasized throughout their case, they seem to be speaking out of both sides of their mouth when it comes to Alex's behavior, other than the fact that they've proven that he is a pathological liar.
We'll be following this for the next several days. Be sure to subscribe so that you can get these videos. Don't forget to check out our outline if you haven't already done that. Patrick did a great job breaking down all of this testimony about time signatures and when phones were working and cars were running and not running to something that you can make some sense of. And it is very illuminating about what could or could not have happened. And be sure to check that video out as well and download the outline, and be sure to subscribe.